Alright, so different ecosystems have different gross primary production. Why is that? That's because they have different climate. That's what makes it a different ecosystem, right? So they have different plants, different animals, all because the climate is different. Different climate gives you a different GPP. Now, what are some of the things that can influence that climate or influence that GPP? We'll get to those in a bit. But first, just look at this. We're looking at terrestrial ecosystems and aquatic ecosystems here. Of course, the highest GPP is your tropical rainforest. Lots of green stuff, lots of growing. But that is only in the terrestrial environment. If you come down, it's about on par with coral reefs. But swamps and marshes are even higher than tropical rainforests when it comes to GPP. They transform a lot more energy than even the tropical rainforest. So if you ever hear somebody say drain the swamp, you want to be like, swamps are important. Let's not drain those, okay? And then as you go down, you can see you have your tropical seasonal forest, rainforest, temperate seasonal forest, boreal savannas, cultivated lands, and then you get down to tundra, desert scrub, and then extreme deserts, like the Atacama, where it gets rain like every 100 years or something. Not a lot of GPP going on there. As for the aquatic systems, swamps and marshes, big time, coral reefs, big time, salt marshes, upwelling zones, so where you have those warm waters flowing away and the cold waters coming up to replace them. Lots of phytoplankton going on there. You get a lot of that. Lakes and streams quite a bit on the continental shelf, so as the land goes away from the ocean before it drops off on that shelf, you get some GPP, and then the open ocean has the least amount. The open ocean is pretty similar to what you would see in the extreme desert, like not a lot of life out in the open ocean. Alright, so what can influence this? Let's just focus on terrestrial real quick. So the things that influence the terrestrial GPP is going to be mean annual temperature. So how warm is it? The warmer it is, the more GPP you get, right? Another thing that's going to influence that is how much it rains. So if you look, mean annual precipitation comes up, higher GPP, but then you kind of plateau and drop off. Why do you think GPP drops off with higher amounts of precipitation? I mean, if you saw like the rainforest, man, it's up there, right? So how can a place where it rains a lot have a lot of high GPP, but raining a lot is not great for GPP? That's because as you increase the rain, you also increase the leaching. If you remember seeing that lateralization that happens in tropical rainforest, where you get those silicates being leached out. So there's kind of a sweet spot here with rain where you want to get somewhere around 2 to 3 meters of rain if you want the highest GPP, and you also want it really warm. Another thing that influences your gross primary production, even your net primary production, is what's available for these organisms to grow. So plants, what do they need to grow? Well, they need sunlight, right? Hello, temperature. They need water. Hello, precipitation. And they need nutrients, right? What do you add to your garden if it's not doing well? You're going to add fertilizer. What does that fertilizer have? A lot of the time, it's going to have nitrogen, it's going to have phosphorus, and it will probably have potassium. Those are like your 3 major elements that need to go into a fertilizer. And if you look, here we're looking at adding nitrogen, adding phosphorus, and adding both nitrogen and phosphorus. In the grassland, adding nitrogen increases Adding phosphorus increases. Adding both really increases. Like, it's more than double the amount, right? How about in the forest? Nitrogen increases, phosphorus increases. Adding nitrogen and phosphorus doesn't really increase it. So in this type of environment, you can kind of predict that maybe nitrogen isn't as limited as phosphorus is. So there's not a big limitation on nitrogen, because when you add it, it helps a little bit, but when you add it in with phosphorus, it doesn't really help. So it's really that phosphorus that is needed in this type of situation. How about in the tundra? Nitrogen helps. Phosphorus helps a little bit. Adding them both helps a lot. So you need both the nitrogen and the phosphorus here. Same here. Why is that? Well, you need to make amino acids, nucleic acids. A lot of these things need phosphorus, need nitrogen. And so these are the limiting elements for these organisms that live in that area. How about aquatic productivity? So here, you're looking at kind of the net PPP, not PPP, only two P's. The net PP, throughout the ocean. And so here, where the land is, you have a gray, and then as it gets red, that's going to be where you have a lot more of your GPP. And you can see like lakes over here really high, over here in these bays really high, like the Bay of China, and then the Mediterranean Sea really high, and then places where you would get those upwellings are really high. So for aquatic productivity, it depends where you are on how you're going to increase or what you need to increase your GPP. For one thing, here, nitrogen and phosphorus, again, is important for those same reasons, amino acids, nucleic acids. If you look at adding nitrogen to your wetlands, okay, phosphorus, yes, both a lot. Stream bottoms, both a lot. Lake bottoms, both a lot. Lake water, a ton, right? So with the lake bottom, it's not as extreme because a lot of stuff does precipitate out. How about in the ocean? Ocean bottom, a little bit, you know. The ocean on the hard bottom, and then open ocean, a ton. Really increases that GPP. And then here we're looking at lakes, and you can look at how carbon, nitrogen, and phosphorus, or carbon and nitrogen, or your control that doesn't get any fertilizer. You can see that you get spikes when it's carbon and nitrogen. With that phosphorus, though, it gets even higher. So it's kind of like what we're seeing here with both that nitrogen and that phosphorus really causes those high peaks, sustained growth. Here, they were doing kind of like this experiment right here where they set up this barrier between this lake and divided it into two parts. One part that didn't get any fertilizer and a part that did get fertilizer. You can see how much more plants or algae are growing in this side than is on that side because they have all those nutrients there to grow with. Something that we see in the ocean, I mean, you can tell there's not a lot of productivity going on the ocean surface out here in the middle. Part of that's because there's not a lot of silica out here. There's not a lot of material that makes it out into the open ocean. So you're not going to find a lot of carbon, a lot of nitrogen. And one major limitation is silica. So silica is important in diatom shells. If you've ever seen a diatom, Google them. They're really cool. They have these really intricate shells that are made of silica, and your diatoms are a major phytoplankton. And so they make a lot of oxygen through photosynthesis. Another thing that is lacking here in the open ocean is iron. Iron's really important in different metabolic pathways. It's really important in mitochondria and setting up your cytochromes, which is important in the electron transport chain. And pretty much the only way you get iron out here in the open ocean is if, like, dust is blown in that contains the iron. Not a lot of iron getting out here, and so that limits your GPP. A hypothesis for increasing GPP in the ocean is by seeding it with iron. Why would you want to put iron in the ocean to increase the GPP? Because it can decrease the carbon dioxide. The ocean and water in general is just a huge carbon dioxide sink. Like, it just diffuses into it. Granted, it doesn't do it really fast, and so you get, like, you don't get a lot of penetration with the carbon dioxide, but here on the surface where you're going to be having these phytoplankton, carbon dioxide comes in here. Adding iron can increase the number of phytoplankton, which can capture CO2. And so seeding the ocean with iron can decrease our carbon dioxide. Carbon dioxide is a greenhouse gas. You decrease the CO2, you decrease your greenhouse gases, you decrease global climate change. So they capture all this carbon, dead plankton sink, reach the bottom where the carbon can stay for like hundreds of years. They can get turned into the sediments, right, until they get released later on. What are some drawbacks to this? Can you think of any ideas like how this could go wrong? Think about it. And while you're thinking about that, let's think about some other stuff. So, which ecosystem has the highest GPP? If we're talking about total between both terrestrial and aquatic, it's going to be the aquatics, right? It's going to be the swamps and marshes. Which one has the highest in the terrestrial environment? It's the rainforest. And why might adding iron to the ocean help? Well, it can decrease overall CO2 concentrations in the atmosphere by increasing GPP in the ocean. That's the quick summary style of it. All right. In the next group, we're going to be talking about energy transfer. So through these different trophic levels, how does energy get transferred? How efficient is that energy transfer?